Hi guys, and welcome to the first ever episode of Chatkins, the Catkin Toys podcast and video series, where we are going to be covering a whole host of topics from play to parenting and everything in between. If you don't know who I am, my name is Kimberly and I run an eco-friendly toy business called Catkin Toys, where we help children to learn through play in an eco-friendly way. I'm also a trained primary school teacher and mum to 2-year-old Arlo. Last week on my Instagram stories, I asked you guys what topics you wanted to know a little bit more about, and one that came up over and over again was Montessori, so I thought it would be a great place for us to start on week 1. Let's get started. Montessori is an education concept created by an Italian doctor called Maria Montessori in the early 1900s. She developed a whole framework for educating children using a child-centered approach based on observations she made in the classroom. Originally, she worked with underprivileged children, but her concepts became so popular that they spread across the world, and now they are used in almost every country. She used observations that she made in the classroom to create her own resources, her own organisation, and everything that would centre around the child and build the foundation that they needed to thrive. Today, Montessori is used all over the world, not only in classrooms, but in homes too. I really wanted to pause here and talk about Maria Montessori's teachings. She developed these teachings to be used in the classroom, and this was in the early 1900s when things like TVs and iPads just didn't exist. I know that if you spend any time at all reading up on Montessori or looking through forums, you will see people with really strong opinions on what is or isn't Montessori. Well, it's my view that Maria Montessori didn't specify how long a child should spend on an iPad or where they should sleep, and therefore we have to be a little bit flexible if we are going to adopt a Montessori way of life. I really wanted to mention this because when I wanted to start Montessori with Arlo, I realised that I was feeling completely overwhelmed. I didn't have an idea of where to start, and I felt like whatever bit I did wouldn't be enough. But I really think the way it should be done is to start off small and make 1 or 2 little changes that are Montessori inspired and work from there. I know from experience and speaking to lots of other parents that you can really get hung up on that, is this Montessori, is this not Montessori? And actually that's a really slippery slope. I think we need to remember that Maria Montessori's principles were based on classrooms and in a completely different world to the modern one that we live in today. And so we have to take them with a little grain of salt and build them around our modern family lives to make them work for us. So let's talk about how we Montessori. So why do we Montessori? Well, we began our Montessori journey when Arlo was only 8 or 9 months old. He'd got a toy box that was full to the brim of toys, household names and electronic flashing toys that you will have seen all over every toy shop in the country. I thought we had given him everything that he needed to play, and yet I watched as he took every little toy out of the toy box, gave it a cursory look and threw it across the floor. I knew that what was in that toy box was not engaging my child and that I had to do something about it. That was when I started to do research online and found the Montessori teachings. I made small changes at first by getting rid of his toy box and arranging his toys in open shelves so that he could select the toys and activities that he wanted to play with and see everything that was available to him. I also put some of the toys away and rotated them so that he was getting a fresh batch of toys every week. Arlo really responded to this, and he went from not playing with anything to wanting to play with everything. I knew that it was going to be a learning curve, that there were things we were going to have to learn, things we were going to have to change, but I saw the benefits almost immediately and was really up for the journey. We follow Montessori in the way that works for our family. I know there are going to be people watching this who want to commit 100% to everything Maria Montessori has to say and everything that the principal suggests you should be doing, and that's absolutely fine. But if you're like me, you might want to pick and choose the things that work for your family and leave out things that don't. That's absolutely fine too. I know from spending time talking to you guys that there can be a lot of people hung up on, is this Montessori? Is this not Montessori? Is this activity Montessori? Is this toy Montessori? What do I do if I'm gifting a toy that isn't Montessori? And a whole host of other things that send us into this whirlwind of questions and self-doubt. I wanted to make a point here of saying that it is perfectly okay to pick and choose the bits of Montessori that you want to work for your family. You don't have to overhaul every room in your house and everything that you do with your child overnight. You can make small little changes that will really help your child and build up over time depending on your own family and what you think is going to work for you. So, let's have a look at all of the different bits and pieces that we need to know to do Montessori in our home. The first Montessori principle I want to talk about is arguably the most important one, and that is the concept of following the child. This means that you spend some time observing your child to see what their interests are, to see what hands they use when they're working, to see what colours they gravitate towards, or what style of activity interests them the most. We then use this information to help and support them by creating activities that follow their interests. For example, I know that Arlo really enjoys cars, and therefore I try to plan activities on his toy rotation that will engage that interest. It's all about allowing the children to create their own path and supporting and following them through their own journey. I know this sounds easy, but actually it's quite difficult. If you imagine sitting and watching as your child struggles with an activity but not getting involved, it's really difficult. But actually, by doing that, you are allowing them to build their own sense of self-worth and independence. When they finally do succeed with that activity, the sense of accomplishment will be really solid for them, and it is really great to see them reach that level of achievement. So, we take our time and we follow the child's lead. We try not to get involved, and we try to watch, observe, and be there for them when they need us, without leading the way. Another term you might hear in Montessori communities is the idea of being the encouraging guide. This is all about supporting your child to achieve, but allowing them to do so independently. It could be presenting them with the resources or the equipment that they need to achieve, or it could be through offering demonstrations of activities before your child has a go. This means that you might sit down with your child and select an activity, particularly if it's a new concept that they haven't seen before, and using as few words as necessary, or none if you can manage it, to show the child what they need to do. The reason we try to use as few or no words at all is because this allows the child to focus solely on our hands, where we are holding the objects, what direction we turn them in, which one we pick up first, which one we pick up last. By adding in words, we're giving the child an extra layer of things that they need to concentrate on, and this can mean that they actually miss things. Instead, it's better to complete a demonstration with as few words as possible, allowing them to focus solely on the activity and how it is completed. We then reset the activity back to how it was at the start and allow them to have a turn. Again, remember, we are following the child and not intervening. We are trying to allow them to complete the activity independently without us getting involved. We are being the encouraging guide by showing them and modelling without doing it for them. Again, this is a concept that can sound really simple, but when you're sitting beside a child who looks puzzled and stuck, it is really easy to just give in and help them. But you've got to remember that in the long term, by not involving yourself, you are really making the best attempt for them to learn and get that sense of achievement for themselves. That is how they are going to ultimately learn the best. The next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is Monstery Spaces, and I think this is an area where people can get really overwhelmed and confused. I really wanted to break it down into its simplest parts. Really, it's all to do with the idea of having a prepared environment. It's all about giving children the access to use things independently. It's about having child-sized furniture wherever possible, having artwork hanging at their level, having access to their own equipment whenever they need it. Really, it's all about making small changes in your home that will suit the needs of your child. Remember what I said earlier, you don't have to adapt every single Montessori principle all at once. You could simply make a start today by clearing a low shelf somewhere in the kitchen to put your child's cup, bowl and plate so that they can access their own equipment and resources to have their own dinner and that they can help you set up the table. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. You also might need to think about having a space for your child to wash and clean themselves independently. Again, this doesn't have to be a separate piece of furniture. It could just be putting a step stool underneath the main sink so that your child can access it independently. It's all about making the space that you have work so that your child can be as independent as possible. Another thing to consider is the way that you are presenting all of your activities and resources to children. The concept of a place for everything and everything in its place is really important in Montessori. It's about teaching children that everything has a place to go and we all work together to keep things neat and tidy. It's also about ensuring that children have access to all the things that they want to have access to at their level. So their resources and toys are kept on an open shelf in baskets or trays that are easy for them to access independently. Some Montessori homes, including our own, have things like a Montessori floor bed where children can get into and out of bed independently. We also have a Montessori-sized wardrobe where Arlo can select his clothes for the day independently, but again, this all depends on the space you have in your home. You need to make Montessori work for you, so try and think about small solutions that you can start with and build up to over time. I know that this concept can seem really overwhelming, so I wanted to break it down into some small steps that you could do straight away. Firstly, you can ditch the toy box. As I talked about earlier, that was how we got started on our Montessori journey, so if you're still using one, it might be time to think about which toys you need to take and make the focus and which ones can go into storage. You need to think about how you present your child activities. For example, if they're completing a jigsaw, the best way to present it to them would be to put the pieces of the jigsaw next to the jigsaw. This encourages the child to want to complete the activity. Whereas if the jigsaw is already completed on the shelf, well, there's nothing there for them to do, is there? By having a little think about how you're presenting the activities, it can really make a difference to how quickly and how well your child engages with them. Again, you might want to give them things that they can use to complete the activity independently. For example, if they're doing a water transfer activity where they're pouring water from one container into another, you might want to provide something like a cloth so that if there are any spills, they can clean. It's just a little bit of a mindset shift to think about how your child is going to approach the activity and everything they're going to need to do it independently. A bookshelf of books is great, but 1 or 2 books displayed forward facing so that they can see the front cover are much more likely to engage them than 20 books with only the spine showing where they can't really see what all of the books are about. So thinking about how you present objects is as important as what objects you are presenting. You need to think about where you're going to keep the rest of your toys that aren't part of your current rotation. For me, we keep ours underneath the stairs in cupboards, but you could put yours wherever you have space in your family home. I like to rotate my toys on a weekly basis, but some toys, for example Arlo's wooden blocks that he loves, and his wooden cars of course, they stay out all the time because I know that if I removed them, he would really miss them. That's our choice, and that's one of the ways that we make Montessori work for us. I don't rotate every activity all the time. Instead, I rotate the other activities around the ones that stay. This really works for us because it allows Arlo to experience getting new toys all the time. Remember at this point that you need to be considering what you learned when you were following the child and being the encouraging guide. Think about what toys and activities your child has shown an interest in and remember to include those on your toy rotation. You might want to consider the different areas of learning, for example having some music-based toys and some maths-based toys, But really, you want to make sure that the activities that you're presenting to your child are things you know they are going to engage in. Remember to monitor carefully. If they aren't engaging with the toy, there is probably a reason. Perhaps it's got too easy for them, or perhaps it's too difficult. Monitor this carefully so that you can make sure that your toy rotations are impactful and that you're only presenting your child with the toys that they want to engage with. Another point here I wanted to note was that you shouldn't go out immediately and spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on fancy trays and boxes and shelves for all of your things. There is just no need. A child is going to get the same amount of enjoyment from an activity, whether it was presented to them in a beautiful ornate tray or whether it's a cardboard box that's been cut down and it's presented in that. At this point, I want to say that you shouldn't have to run out and spend hundreds of pounds buying new boxes and shelves and trays for all of your activities. If you're just getting started with this, think about how you can make use of the things that you have around the home. For example, you could cut down some cardboard boxes to turn them into trays and use these to get started. You don't have to spend hundreds of pounds, and you can wait until your child outgrows some of the toys that you have or adapt them to suit more Montessori styles. For example, if you have a box of Lego, you could think about how to present that to your child to make it more engaging. For example, you could build half of a structure and allow them the opportunity to try and build the other half. It's just about getting creative with what you do have rather than going out and buying all new things to make it look like Montessori shelfies that you might have seen online. There are so many beautiful Montessori shelfies out there, and that is amazing and definitely something that you might want to aspire to in the future. But for now, just think about how you can get started with the things that you have and test it out to see if it's something you really want to do in your home for the long term. I also want you to think about the areas of learning. For example, practical life, sensory, language, mathematics, and culture. Do bear in mind, though, that you still should be following the child's interests. For example, if you were going to do an activity teaching a child how to clean something, it might be good, in Arlo's case, to do something like cleaning a car, because I know that that is a topic area that he is really enthused about. So while you might want to cover all of the different topics, remember you've still got to link them back to the things that your child is interested in. I wanted to leave you with some final thoughts on how you could get started with Montessori today. Montessori is an enormous topic, and in this video and podcast, we've only managed to scratch the surface. But I hope it's given you some ideas of what you need to do to start Montessori in your home. Remember, you can start small, and as you learn more, build up over time. You don't need to go through what I did, which is the feeling of overwhelm, worrying that you're not doing everything right and that you're not making enough choices. You can start with one or two things and build up. It could be that you start with asking your child to help you to load the dishwasher, or encouraging them to sweep up after themselves. Involving them in day-to-day chores is a really good way to build their self-esteem and for them to see themselves as part of the family unit. It could be that they bring their own plate from the table, that they set their own space, that they pour their own drink. Think about little things that you're already doing and how you can make them more Montessori aligned by allowing your child to do them independently. This is a great place to start because it doesn't require any equipment, any rearranging, or anything that you need to do around the home. It can simply be the next time you speak to your child, you ask them or encourage them to do something for themselves. Remember, it's not about saying to them, "Can you put your plate in the dishwasher, please?" It's about leading them to a point where they want to do it for themselves. Remember, you're being the encouraging guide. You could say things like, I think all of our plates belong in the dishwasher, and see if your child has an interest in coming to help you. If they don't, that's absolutely fine. You can ask them again next time. You should at no point force them to do something, because this is just going to create a negative relationship with the thing that you're trying to get them to do. Instead, ask them calmly in ways that make them want to come and do it independently. Other ways that you could get started today are to take some toys that you already have and use them to create new activities. For example, if your child has any animal figures, you could take photos of them and use them as a matching activity where they match the physical toy to the picture of it. We have loads of free printables on the website that you can get your hands on as a great place to start too. Or you can start with typical Montessori activities, for example, transferring water from one cup to another or transferring rice with a spoon. Remember, you can use the resources that you already have at home to make really meaningful activities. For example, if you have any animal figures, you could take pictures of them and allow your child to match the physical object to the printed photo. We have a whole host of free printable resources that you can get from the website, and you can use resources that you already have around the home. For example, you could grab a box, pop some holes in it, and allow your child to post lollipop sticks through the holes. You could use cups to pour water from one cup into another, or use spoons to transfer rice from one bowl into the next. There are lots of different activities that you can use that are low cost and can use the toys that you already have. So that's it, guys. I hope you have learned a little bit more about Montessori today and a few practical tips that you can use to get started with Montessori in your home. I'd really love to know what you think and how you get on. So if you've got any questions or anything you'd like to share, then please leave us a comment. And don't forget, we'll be publishing lots of different topics over the coming weeks. So be sure to like and subscribe and make sure that you don't miss out on what's coming next. Next week, we're going to be talking to you about the topic of loose parts play, what it is, why it's beneficial, and how you can use loose parts in your everyday life to make activities all the more exciting. So be sure to join us then. Bye!